Hi, welcome to Sewing with Sandy. Today we are going to make Butterick 7014. I made this long lounge set. I love it, so cozy. I'm in New England, it's cold. We have about 6 inches of snow on the ground and it's only the middle of January, so it is really chilly. And this velour from Minerva is so soft and elegant. This goes all the way to the floor. You can see a picture of it here. I like this pattern so much, I'm going to actually make this a two-piece set. Joggers have never been in something that I've worn, but I want to give it a try because this top is gorgeous. Now, I didn't put the cording in, and you can certainly do that. And if I made something that I was going to wear out, I would put the cording in more like athleisure. This is more like loungewear that I would wear around the house. Also, the cuffs on this are a little big. I think I would skinny these down just a bit on here. I'm 5'2". I took about 3 inches off the bottom. So if you're taller than 5'5", you might want to really measure and think about how much length you want to add to it, the pattern. But outside of that, it does take some fabric, you know, because there's big long pieces, but it goes up super fast. There's 2 little patch pockets here. The sleeves are sewn in flat. This is so much fun to wear. It's so cozy. I absolutely love this fabric. So let's get started. Alrighty, we're gonna start with the pockets. And the instructions have you doing a basting stitch around the corner of each pocket. That's so you can pull it and turn it under. Personally, I prefer to do a stitch a 1/2 inch, because there's a 5/8 inch seam allowance, a 1/2 inch all the way around the outside of the pocket. And then we're going to fold the top down on this fold line here. I just kind of measure it. And stitch that at 5/8 of an inch. And you're just stitching here and here, 5/8 of an inch. All right, then you're going to turn it inside right. You're gonna turn it inside right, and then you have this nice finish on the top of your pocket. All right, then I take my stitched pocket to my ironing board, and if you use glass head pins, you can stick them right into the ironing board and get the pocket exactly the way you want it. And I use that 1/2 inch seam, that stitching line, I roll it in. So now it's a 5/8 inch seam and I have a really pretty pocket, right? That pocket's great. I'm happy with that. We're going to apply it to the front of the garment. So this is piece 1. And I just lined up my tissue and poked a hole through the dot that the size I cut. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lift the tissue and replace that pin. You can mark it with chalk if you prefer, but this is fairly easy. So now the pin is on one side of the tissue. I have 2 pockets, so I need to flip this over, and I'm gonna put a pin where these pins have come out. Blue one in so you can see it. All right, so now I have pins going both ways, and when I open up my pattern, my fabric, I have pins sticking through the fabric that I can line my pocket up to. And I know it's hard to see because it's this wild print, but I'm gonna line the top of my pocket right up with those pins. Make sure it's straight. And fold my nice pressed edge under. Pin it down. And once I get them both pinned and they're straight and I'm happy with them, I'm going to edge stitch them all the way around here on the front, and then, except for the top, obviously, I need to be able to put my hand in there, and the pockets will be on. All right, you can't even see the pocket, right? Take your time, go slow. I used my edge foot. You can see, and just edged it. This fabric is really slippery, so if you have something that isn't quite as slippery, it might be a little bit easier, but yeah, put them on and go with it. Especially a pattern like this that's so busy, you won't necessarily see if you miss the pocket a little bit. So now we're going to sew the shoulder seams together. So I'm going to take the front and the back. There's a lot of fabric here. And sew them together, right sides together at the shoulders. You have this angle cut like on your shoulder, and that's because you have a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and that helps you line it up. Because when you open it up, you want the collar to be round. You want a rounded opening for the collar. So there's one shoulder. I'm just gonna go sew these together, front to back. My fabric isn't super stretchy, so I stitched it and then overlocked it. I'm not gonna put some bias banding on here. You can if you want, just to give it a little more structure. If you have something that's super stretchy and you're afraid it's going to drag down, I'm perfectly fine with mine. It's pajamas, right? You know, so we're gonna open it up. So we have the right side facing us. We wanna make sure we know which side is the front and which side is the back. So my pockets are over here, so this is my front. And we're gonna apply the sleeves. Now, these sleeves are symmetrical, so that is very helpful, but it's important to note that when you're looking at sleeves, this double notch means the back of the garment. So I'm just going to put a quick pin in each of these sleeve pieces so I know that when I place them down, that's the back of the garment. Because if your sleeve isn't symmetrical, that's going to make a big difference. In this case, it is. And then also this is the center. This dot here represents the center. So I'm going to put a pin in each one of those, each one of the sleeves right at the center dot. The rest of them I'm not too concerned about. You know, in general, when you sew a sleeve, this section from the underarm to the notch is a 1-to-1 ratio on both sides. And then this is where you ease it in. But this is a knit. This is going to go in flat. We're going to put in a flat sleeve. Okay, so here's my shirt, loungewear. This is the front, this is the back. So I want to lay my sleeve right side up, and I want the piece that has this pin marking the back. All right, so this sleeve is going to go on this way, and then of course this other sleeve will go on the same way. So let's look at this. All right, back of my garment, back of my sleeve, we're good there. This pin is where the shoulder seam is on my garment. So I'm going to flip my sleeve over, and I'm going to line that pin up with my shoulder seam. And if I had pressed my seam, it would be pressed to the back, which is pretty classic. All right. Now I want to sew this from the garment side because I want to be able to pick up any ease that's going on in the sleeve with my feed dogs. So I'm going to flip this all over. And just redo my pin here at the top. And then I'm going to take the edge of my sleeve hole, armhole, and the edge of my sleeve, and I'm going to pin those together. And then, like I said, this is a 1-to-1. This fabric is very grabby. I love it, but because it's like a velour, it's grabby. So the pieces grab to each other and they don't slide back and forth. So this is my underarm section. So this is 1-to-1. And now I'm going to take this convex and concave seam, and I'm just going to walk them around. And miracle of miracles, they should fit beautifully. You do need a few pins, and you do need to make sure that your sleeve is face down. because you're going to have, like, there's a little bit of ruffling going on there, and the feed dogs will take care of that. All right, just repin it a little bit. So it looks good. That looks great. And the feed dogs will pick up any of the extra. So I'm gonna go do the same thing on this side. If you're at all nervous about it, just baste the sleeve, that's all. Baste it, take the pins out, because you can baste it with the pins in. Basting is the longest stitch your machine does. Mine does a 5. Some of them will do 6s. Baste it, take the pins out, see how it looks, make sure you don't have any dimples or ridges, and then you can go back and stitch it. If you're confident, you can just go ahead and stitch it up. Woo, big pile of leopard. Sleeves went in great, and I just overlocked them, but I made sure that I didn't have any dimples or catches or anything before I did that. Now we're gonna sew up the side seams. We have 2 huge seams to sew. We're gonna sew up the side and up the sleeve. Because generally you want the sleeve seam towards the sleeve because it helps give the sleeve cap a little lift. We're gonna sew from the bottom this way because it just makes it easier to go over this bump, because both pieces of this sleeve juncture are coming together and going in the same direction. So it's easier to go over them from the seam side than it is to go over them from the sleeve side, you know, from the other side. Just put a couple of pins in there to secure them well and make sure they're lined up. And then I go all the way down to the bottom. It's a lot of fabric. Pin this bottom edge because I want my bottom hem to be even, and if we cut them out right, this should work. And then pin all the way down to the underarm. Then from the sleeve side, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna start at the cuff edge. Whoop. Make sure that's even. And then pin the sleeve. We're gonna do this for both sides. So after this is done, you can try it on. See how much fun it is to wear. And then we just have to put the collar and the cuffs on and hem it. Okay, look at this. We have a dress sewed all the way up the side and the arm, both sides. And of course, I tried it on. I'm sure you're going to try yours on now too. Just don't try it on too many times because you don't want the neck edge to stretch out too much. I know it is a knit. If it was a woven, it would be more of an issue. All right. That is a lot of leopard. Woohoo! Right, now we're going to put the cuff on the sleeve. So we have our cuff, which is piece 6, and we're going to fold it, fold the notch edges together, right sides together, and stitch that up. And this is what we end up with. And we're gonna fold the wrong sides together. So we're gonna fold it back on itself to make a cuff. Now, at this point, you can baste the raw edges or just pin them. That is totally up to you. Just trying to get my seam flat here. All right. So you want to make these raw edges come together all the way around. So I've pinned this, and because my fabric is so slippery, the inside of this is super slippery, I'm going to go ahead and baste these raw edges together in the seam allowance. So I have a 5/8 inch seam allowance. I'll probably do this at like 3/8 or a 1/2 inch on both of these cuffs before I attach them to my sleeve, because that way I can ensure that I get a good juncture. This is so slippery, I don't want to miss having 3 layers and miss. So I'm going to go take care of that. Okay, so sometimes fabrics that we love can be challenging, and that is why we take an extra minute to just do an extra step. So yes, sewing this together was definitely an extra step, but now this is one unit. It feels like one piece. I mean, I have slippery fabric on the inside and grabby fabric on the outside. Do I love the fabric? Absolutely. Is it a little challenging? Yes. So I want to make sure, because this has a nap and I want my nap to go down, I just want to make sure that I get the piece, the side where the nap is going to match the nap on the sleeve. And what I want to do, this is my seam, I want to fold my cuff in half and put a pin on the opposite side of my sleeve. All right, and then here's my sleeve. I'm going to fold my sleeve at the seam and I'm going to put a pin at the opposite side of my seam. So now I know that these seams need to match up and then these pins need to match up, and that way I can gather this, because this is bigger, right? I need to gather this a little bit. The other thing is, when I pin it, I want to pin the cuff up, because this sleeve will be down at the feed dogs and the feed dogs will help gather in some of that. So I want to roll this sleeve. So this is how it's going to look when it's finished. I want to roll this sleeve over, this cuff over the sleeve. Right sides together. So I'm going to start with this pin that I have at the seam allowance, and I'm going to match up, well, there's no pin. I'm going to match up the two seam allowances here. And I want to try to get a good juncture, because you're going to see that when you roll the sleeve down. And then I'm going to match these two pins. So I know that the ease that I have will be between these two pins. Pin out of there. There we go. So you can see the sleeve is a little bit bigger than the cuff. And as I sew it, I'm going to stretch the cuff a little bit. I mean, you can throw another pin in there only because this fabric is just a little bit grabby now that I have the two velour sides together. But now we've added the ease equally all around the sleeve. And so we're going to go ahead and sew that. I have an overlocker, so I'm going to overlock mine. You have a serger. If not, do a second row of stitching in there and trim it so it's nice and neat, or do a zigzag stitch with your on your machine. All right, we sewed on our nice little cuff here. I finished the edge. We have a nice little junction there and a nice little cuff. This is a very relaxed kind of cuff. So if you want something a little more snug, you can taper in the sleeve a little bit and make the cuff a little smaller. But for this loungewear, it's perfect. I really like the way this looks and fits. It's super comfy. So the next thing we're going to work on is the collar, and we have this scrunchy cowl neck collar. If you, this is piece, this is piece 4. I had to cut 2 pieces because I didn't have enough fabric. So what we want to do is you're going to, normally this would be cut on the fold, and what you're going to do is sew this end together, right sides together. I'm going to end up sewing both of them together. And you want to, before you sew them together, if you want to put cording in it, and I am not going to, I don't need cording, it's more pajama loungewear, but if I was going to wear it out, like if I was going to make the top and make it loungewear that I would wear out, I would get some cording. This is stretchy cording. I got this from Mood. And right where this mark is here, this is a buttonhole mark. You're going to put a buttonhole right in the center of your collar, because when it folds over, that's where the goes actually like this. That's where the thread will go, the cording will go through. But I mean, I could conceivably wear this to bed. I don't want cording while I'm in bed, and I certainly don't want cord stops or knots on the end of my cord. So we're going to sew the collar together. We'll start with that. Okay, here's my collar. Now yours will have one seam. This will be the fold. And if you have the buttonhole in it, it would be over here. So we're going to fold this down, wrong sides together, sorry. And again, similar to what we did with the cuff, if your fabric is super slippery like mine, I'm going to baste the edges all the way around, just because it's so much easier to handle one piece of fabric, one unit. So because I have a seam on each side because I ran out of fabric, I'm not going to put my seam in the center back, which is where you would put yours if you had a fold in your fabric when you cut it out. But I don't want a seam going down the front of my garment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my center front and center back, and you're going to quadrant yours very similarly. I'm going to put my two seams together and mark the halfway point between the seams, and you would take your one seam and mark this piece that was actually on the fold where your buttonhole would be in this general area here. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my garment. I'm going to match up my two shoulder seams and find my center front. I'm going to go back and match up my two shoulder seams and find my center back. Because the neckline is longer in the front than it is in the back, I can't use my shoulder seams as my side seams or my fourth part of my quadrant. So I need to take these center front and center back seams and put them together, the pins, sorry. And then walk my neckline around to find my other quadrant, which is going to be a little forward. The seams on my neckline are going to be a little forward. That's okay, I'm all right with this. It's a pretty busy pattern. And then check the other side. So that quadrant is a little short of the shoulder area. I'll show you. So you can see, here's my shoulder seam. Here's actually where the quadrant is. So it's in equal quadrants. All right. So because this neckline is larger than this, we want to make sure that the ease is even all the way around, and that's why we do this. So now I want to decide which side is going to be the right side for me. And I'm going to put that face down onto my neckline and match up the center pin on my neckline. You can see why we baste these edges together. The center pin on my garment and the center pin on my neckline. And I want the neckline of my garment down, so I'm going to pin it from the cowl collar side. And I'm going to match up all four of these quadrant pins all the way around. So you can see now that my collar in these quadrants is a little smaller than the neckline, and that's because we want the collar to just kind of bring the neckline in just a tiny, tiny bit. It's not too bad. It's just a little bit smaller, and putting that towards the feed dogs will help ease that in and give that neck edge we'll give that neck edge some substance. Yep. So once we sew the neckline in, we're done. You can finish this edge and turn it under and understitch it like it shows on the directions. So you would, after you sew this seam, you could sew the seam allowance down on the garment edge and sew along the edge of the garment. I don't think I'll do that. I'm perfectly happy. I like the way the cuffs came out. I didn't need to do it on the cuffs. I don't think I'll need to do it on the neckline. The only thing left to do is try it on and hem it, and it's done. Yay, let's see how it looks.